GalaxyCon. How we doing? So listen, we are live streaming right now on GalaxyCon's YouTube page. So we're going to do this again. Ready? Hold on. Ready? Good afternoon, GalaxyCon. How we doing? Oh, I'm so excited to be here. This is my first time here. This is our first time here in Oklahoma City, so I am super excited. Thank you for having us. We have a fun Q&A here for the next 45 minutes. By the way, there is a live microphone right there. Please do not make us regret it. That being said, I just got a couple rules. You know, I know that we're going to have a lot of questions, so if you could keep your 2, 3, 4, 8-part questions to a minimum, that would be great. No requests, no can you say this line, can you sing happy birthday to my grandma? I'm sorry, Grandma, I'll be here next year. But rule number 3, and is really the most important rule, and that is to have fun. So you guys ready to have some fun? Are you guys online ready to have some fun? You can't hear me. You can't answer me. So with no further ado, please help me welcome, you know her from Birds of Prey, Rain, Batwoman. Please help me welcome at this time, Rachel Skarsten. Hello.
Hello.
Welcome to Oklahoma.
Thank you.
I see
you
wore the
boots.
Here.
I have a whole cowboy motif going on this weekend.
Yes?
I do. I have a shirt that I cannot wear in Los Angeles. Well, I guess actually I can. You can wear anything in Los Angeles, but it really goes with the vibe here. So I'm excited. I got my boots. But I'm actually really excited to be in Oklahoma City, which I think I've told some of you already who I've met, because I would always drive. I'm originally from Toronto. I would drive from Toronto to Los Angeles in this big old, well, many cars that I had, but originally in this big old green Ford Explorer that I also incidentally lived in for a while. And Oklahoma City would always be a stop for me.
So you would do the Route 66 through the States over?
Not really. I'd kind of just take the quickest route. So I'd go down from Toronto through St. Louis, Oklahoma City, top of Texas, across. But there was a coffee shop that I would always come to here, and I've been with my brother and one of my girlfriends who's from Arkansas. She's actually coming to visit me this weekend, and every time I'd go to this shop, and it's still there. And I went there this morning.
You went there this morning.
Yeah.
What is the name of it?
Elemental Coffee. Little shout out.
Anybody familiar? One person.
Like,
all right, one person.
not.
One person.
Yeah, but I loved it. It was great. It was great to meet.
That's awesome. So when you come and do shows like this, do you get a chance to go explore the cities, or is it usually fly in, hotel, convention center, hotel, fly out?
Oh no, I think you definitely get, it's obviously a short chance because you're
Right.
only here for a weekend, and I don't think you can experience a city in its entirety in 3 days. But I actually think it's one of the most beautiful gifts that cons have given me, aside from the opportunity to have community and to meet people who love the shows that I've loved and been on, but also just to experience cities around the US that I wouldn't necessarily go to. I went to the show in Madison, Wisconsin. No one is ever like, oh, I really need to go to vacation on Madison, Wisconsin. You know what I mean? That's the place. And I had the best time there. And, so I really love cons for that. And this one, when my agent was like, oh, it's in Oklahoma City, I was like, yeah, I get to go back because I haven't been here in a while now.
That's awesome. Something I want to talk about, you recently, by the way, congratulations, new mother.
Thank you.
What is, yeah, absolutely. What has that been like? While trying to also balance a career in the entertainment industry?
Yeah, is anyone a parent out there? Yeah, there you go. So I thought I had it all figured out before I became a parent. And sometimes I sit there and I think oh, the stupid things I said before I knew, it's full on. And you kind of go through this metamorphosis in a way of becoming a different person. I do actually feel as an artist, it's given me, because I've played moms in the past, and I was like, I have dogs, this is fine. I understand this love, And it's deepened my understanding of the human experience, which is so much a part of my job, understanding the human experience in all its iterations, you know? So for that, I'm really grateful, but by the same, and it's excited me in a different way to get to portray that. But in another way, it's been challenging because now you have this great little love, and it's hard to be away from them and the reality of my job, like say for example with Batwoman or Birds of Prey, the hours of that are so crazy. And I have been back to work since becoming a mother, and I was like, wow, I guess my perspective on things has really changed, because before, if you were to say to me, okay, we're gonna do night shoots in New Zealand for 11 months, I'd be like, I'm there. You know what I mean? And now I'm like, oh, it's not just me to consider anymore. So I think it's like over the course of this past year, I've had to navigate who I am now as an artist, as a person. But I mean, I'll always be an actor. That's so much of the fabric of who I am. So, yeah.
You mentioned Birds of Prey. Now, you were cast while you were in high school, right?
Yeah.
What is that process like? Being in high school, going to shoot, going back to high. Did that make you the most popular kid in school?
No, it did not.
Oh, wow.
It was a really interesting experience because at that point, I didn't really think I wanted to be an actor. It was just kind of one of the things, like one of my extracurricular activities. You know, I also played hockey and I did this and then whatever. And I was going to a school for the arts for visual art, but I knew a lot of the drama kids who were actors, and I knew that they made money, which I did not in visual art. And so I thought, yeah, this is a sweet gig, like let's do this. And then I was really lucky, and I booked Birds of Prey, you know, very soon into my foray into acting. And I was so out of my depth. Like, I look back on that series and at that character of Dinah, and her being this, you know, girl from a small town coming into the big city and being so out of her depth. And I think, was I even acting? Like, that was my experience. That's how I was feeling. But I was grateful for that experience in many ways. But one, because after I actually left the industry for a while, because that show really taught me that it is a business, and it wasn't just like me playing make-believe as a child. And then when I came back to it, I think that's when I really took ownership over the fact that I loved this crazy industry and wanted to be a part of it. So I kind of look at that as the turning point for me.
I think every actor has that moment where they're going to quit the industry, and then something happens.
Every day.
And then something happens, a role, you know, they get cast in a role. Did you have that as well, where you were, yeah, I'm going to walk away from this and focus on something else?
Yeah, I think it was Birds of Prey, because I, as I mentioned, was from Toronto. This show filmed in Los Angeles, which now I would like kill for. But at the time I was like, oh, LA. And I landed there, did the job, and it was a job, you know? And I was used to doing it in the summertime and then coming home. But I think the job for me that you're talking about that made me love acting was probably Lost Girl. Because I came back to the industry, I had all these trepidations. I'd done a couple of things, but nothing more permanent. And I get this job on Lost Girl, and I land in what can only be described as summer camp, and just had the best time with everyone. And to this day, I was talking to Polymos this morning, Anna Silk yesterday. They're some of my very best friends. I feel really grateful for that, and it made me fall back in love with what we do.
That's awesome. Now, you mentioned Toronto, you mentioned playing hockey as a goalie, right?
Oh yeah, and I'd like to mention that my Edmonton Oilers beat the Dallas Stars last night in double overtime. Yes, I'm a very big hockey fan.
I was going to say, is that something that when you're born in Canada that they just
It's
put
like a
on, they just stamp it
prerequisite.
on your birth certificate that you are now a hockey fan.
Yes, I think so. Although I wasn't always a hockey fan, but you know, I drank the Kool-Aid and became a hockey fan. I mean, it's just so cold up there a lot of the time. Like, I mean, also in so like the northeastern part of the United States, I feel like people are very big hockey fans there. But what else are you gonna do in 10 months of winter? It's not 10 months, but
Now, you mentioned my Edmonton Oilers as opposed to the Maple Leafs, eh?
okay. So I'm gonna tell you a story that I think transcends the sport of hockey. And I have experienced this in like with an actor once too, but I was on a plane. I was a ballerina. I danced ballet. I was like that kid in gym class, you know that girl, everyone knows her, like you're playing like dodgeball and she's like over there, she's like over in the corner and the ball comes and she's like like that's me. I was that girl. And one night my brother was watching a hockey game. I watched it with him. I saw the goalies, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's so cool. Like, I have to do that, But that's ridiculous. Like, I want to be a goalie. I can't even handle, like, a dodgeball coming at me, And so I'm sitting at dinner, and I tell my mom, like, I'm going to be a goalie. And bless her, she supports me in everything, but she laughed. And, like, it was funny. It was funny. But that kind of motivated me, and I was like, well, I'm just going to show you. I'm going to be a goalie. So I start my journey. I can't even skate at this point. I start my journey of being an ice hockey goalie. And that summer, we went to Norway because my father's Norwegian. That side of the family lives there. So we're in Norway, and we're coming back to Toronto on the plane. And my mom is like that person who loved to see the pilots. So she'd like leverage my brother and I to go see them. She'd be like, my kids want to meet the pilot. And we'd be like, oh my gosh, this is so embarrassing, And I'm 14, and I'm like, I don't want to meet the pilot. But we go up, and the pilot says to me, like, oh, are you a hockey fan? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, well, Matt Sundin and Tommy Salo are back there. For those of you who don't know, Tommy Salo was the goalie of the Edmonton Oilers at this point. So he's like, do you want to meet them? I'm like, yeah, absolutely. So I go back, and Tommy Salo, I'll never forget it, is this big Swedish dude. He like comes down to me, and I was like, Tommy, I want to be a goalie. And he looks me dead in the eye, and he's like, you're going to be an amazing goalie. And that was it. Edmonton Oilers fan for life.
I love that. Yeah. Now, you mentioned a lot of extracurricular activities, which led to even in school, like you didn't just get one degree. You double majored, correct?
I did a double major, although I was, where she's right there. I was like, I wish that I had gone to college now because I would have appreciated, I feel like I got a double major in English and beer, But yes, I did. I went to a university in Canada, and I loved that time of life. I mean, you couldn't pay me to do it again. I'm too old now, but
so
I
one
did
of those
love
was
it.
in history, right?
Classics.
Classic history.
Yes.
So when you book a role for Rain as Elizabeth Tudor, as Elizabeth I, are you reading the script going, maybe this is a little bit inaccurate. Maybe what if what actually happened was?
Yeah, so for any of you who have seen Rain, it is not particularly historically accurate. But when I booked the role, I didn't know that because I'd heard of Rain, but I hadn't seen it yet. So I booked the role, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna play Queen Elizabeth. Like, I go to Barnes & Noble, I'm like buying all these books about like Elizabeth and Mary and like the feuds and like blah, blah, blah. And I was reading them in anticipation of meeting the then showrunner, or the showrunner. And I have this meeting with her, and I'm like, thinking I'm so good. I'm like, oh, I've done all this reading. I read this book and this book. And I remember she looked at me and she was like, oh yeah, no, you don't need to read any of that. We don't follow history. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. So, it was not historically accurate. I think actually the thing that I was the most nervous about on that show was my accent, because I had to have an English accent. As you can hear, I do not have an English accent. And so many of the actors on that show were actually English. So I'll never forget my first read through. I'm so nervous, right? Like, first of all, I made the massive mistake of watching the 21 episodes that were out before I joined the show. And so now I'm a fan of the show. I'm like fangirling. And I come in and I'm like, oh my gosh, there's that character and there's that character. And like, and I'm shaking and I'm nervous. And we sit down, and in this episode, I don't come into the last scene. So we're doing the whole read through, and I'm just sitting there and I'm like, oh, I can't, screw up this, like my 4 lines in this episode. And as my scene comes, I'm not kidding you, everyone in the read through, like you're all sitting around a table and you have your scripts. Everyone goes like this and looks over at me, and I was like, here it comes. And when I look back at my audition tape, because I did actually get to see my audition tape from Rain, I am shocked that they hired me. I don't know what accent I was doing, but I'm fairly confident it wasn't an English accent. There were words, sure, that were good, but other ones, I go in and out. I'm sounding like Spanish. I'm sounding I don't even know what's happening. So, needless to say, I got a coach, who helped me a lot, and then I got really good at it, to the point where I could just drop in and out of it. And I will tell you, to this day, I make dinner reservations in an English accent because you always get a better table. So, just a word to the wise.
Oh.
Yeah, no, it's a thing. It's actually a thing. You're just cooler. You're innately cooler,
All right, I'm gonna try this tonight. I'm gonna try this tonight.
You're gonna sound like me in my
oh my
original
God, it's
edition.
gonna be the worst. No, we have no tables for
You're
you.
gonna be like, you're insane. You're not coming to this restaurant. No table for you.
One of my favorite things, genres, if you will, is Christmas movies, and
Same.
and you have been able to partake in a few, and now, of course, the big Christmas thing is Hallmark Christmas movies. Were you a fan? So you were a fan of Christmas movies, the Christmas movie genre, before you started working?
Okay, I'm a fan of Christmas.
Right, yes.
Love me some Christmas.
Right.
But I hadn't watched Hallmark Christmas movies before my first one, which was Marry Me at Christmas. But my mom had. And my mom was a big fan of Hallmark movies. So I remember we were in the Bahamas. My mom and her sisters took their kids on this trip, and we were down on the beach, and I get this phone call from my agent. And I was like, oh, sweet. She's like, hey, Hallmark called, and they'd really like you to do this movie. And I was like, oh, you know what? My mom loves these movies. I'd love to do it. And I remember going back down to the beach, and my mom's sitting there, and I shit you not, I'm like, Mom, I'm gonna do a Hallmark Christmas movie. And my mom's laying down like this, and she gets up, and she's looks at me, she puts her hands on my shoulders, and she's like, oh my gosh, you've made it. I was like, wow, that's all it took. So I did it. I think she Facebooked 9,000 people. That movie was thankfully and very gratefully a success, and they invited me back. And I love working for Hallmark. They're lovely.
Now, I start celebrating Christmas around November 1st.
Yeah, well,
Are
too
you-
late, my friend.
Too late. You skipped totally.
Free Halloween.
Free Halloween. So let's talk decoration. Do you do decorations outside your house?
When I have an outside my house,
Okay.
In Los Angeles,
Right.
we don't really have an outside of the house. It's just a sad gate, and it's kind of sad. I wish that there was more of a neighborhood thing where at Halloween you could hand out candy.
Right.
I'd just be handing out to myself. And then I lived in an apartment for many years, so also didn't. But inside, it's legit.
It's a winter wonderland.
Yeah. My mom even has, and I got one. It's for the toilet seat, where when the toilet is down, Santa's smiling, and then when the toilet seat's up, he's closing his eyes, but you kind of see one eye. Yeah, it's weird.
So let me. This is a conversation that I have. I literally have year round. It's May, and we're gonna have it. Inflatables. Is it cheating, or are they acceptable?
Well, it depends. If that's the only thing on your lawn, then
Right.
it's kind of a cheat. But if you did some lights and stuff,
If you
then-
did some lights and
why do you
incorporate-
have an inflatable?
One?
One. Do you have multiple?
I have multiple inflatables.
Oh, well, then that's not
Yes.
cheating.
Yeah, it's and then I rotate every year. You're like, oh, well, last year I did the gingerbread, so this year I'm gonna do the robot or the Santa.
Okay, I'm just gonna ask because I feel like everyone's thinking this. How big is your lawn?
It's enough to have a 20-foot Santa. Which is really
To go
scary
to your
because I
house.
live right by the airport too, so you never know exactly where.
People are like flying out and they're like, whoa, that guy.
Would you like to answer some audience questions? Yeah. All right, so we do have a microphone right there. So if you do have questions, this is always how it goes. Everyone's always shy. Everyone's always shy to be first, and then once one person goes, there's like a 20-person line. So I'll continue talking while you all reach up that courage. Now you've been in multiple DC shows. Were you into comic books prior to being cast?
I wasn't into comic books per se, but I loved as a little girl Adam West's Batman. That show would be on reruns, and I would wake up really early before my parents would get up, and I'd go down and I'd watch it, and I loved, I do like the boom, pow, and all the characters, you know. And actually, when I was saying the story about Tommy Sallow and saying I've had this experience with actors, Adam West is one of them. It's one of the reasons I love Comic-Cons, because years later, I was at a Comic-Con, and we're back in the lunchroom, and everyone's sitting around, and of course, my agent Holly, she knows my love of Adam West, and he's at this Comic-Con, and of course, I know this, and she goes, hey, Rachel, Adam's sitting over there, and I don't know what happened to me. I got so nervous. I was like, don't look over there. Don't, just be cool, you know? And I'm sitting like this, and she's like, just go say hi to him. I know his agent. We can go say hi. And I was like, no, just shut your mouth, you know? And so then after 10 minutes, I was like, this is insane. I am an adult. I need to get it together and go meet this guy. So I say to Holly, okay, all right, introduce me. So she goes over, and then she goes like this, and I go over, and I blacked out. I actually don't remember what I said to him. I just remember kind of kneeling. He was sitting at the table. Anyway, I finished whatever I was doing, come back over to Holly, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I blacked out. Was I cool? Was I okay? And I'll never forget, because she cannot lie. She was like, uh-huh. But as he left, he turned around, looked directly at me, gave me a wink, and walked out, and I was like, I'm dead. I can die now. It was so cool. So I was a huge Batman fan. I had the pajamas and a Batman sleeping bag, and I had a Batmobile and all of those things. So then to be involved, not only with DC, but very specifically in that world that Batman lived in both shows, was a real thrill for me. Yeah, so yes. The short form of to answer your question.
I love the story about Adam West. Do you find yourself fangirling out while at these shows?
Yeah, who doesn't? There's always so many interesting people. Actually, my husband is very into comics, animation, manga, anime, that kind of thing. So now there's a whole new level when I come to the show. He's not here at this one, but when he would come and he'd geek out over an artist or someone who did a voice of a character, that's super cool. I mean, no, if an actor says that they don't geek out over any other actor, they're just liars. They're just straight up liars. That's not true. Everyone has an idol. Everyone has someone who was on a show that they watched that touched them at a time in their life and was special to them, you know? This is gonna sound so weird, but I loved this part doesn't sound weird. I loved Star Trek, so I geek out over specifically Next Generation, big Trekkie. Yeah, where are you? Thank you. But also The Walking Dead. So every time I come and I see someone from The Walking Dead, I need to stand in their line and get their autograph. You know, I just think that's, again, part of our experience. Everyone has a favorite TV show.
Does your husband send you with like a list? Does he look at the guest lineup and be like, okay, so-and-so is going to be there. I need you to...
Well, he was actually really sad he couldn't come to this one, so I don't think he looked up anything about it. He's like in denial that I'm even here. So no. Hey.
Oh, hello.
I was a big fan of yours in Birds of Prey. When they did Crisis on Infinite Earths, I know they brought some of the cast back to do cameos. I was a little surprised that you were working for him at the time that you weren't included. Was there ever talk of it, or do you know why you weren't included?
Well, I think that kind of presented an interesting problem for them, because then I played two different characters within like that same world, right? So they were bringing back characters from the show where I was Dinah, and now all of a sudden I'm Alice.
But they had the guy who played the Autumn play two characters in that.
Exactly. You know what's funny though, because I was kind of bummed that I wasn't a part of that crossover, because they were so epic, you know?
Right.
But by the same token, we had this crazy filming schedule in the first season of Batwoman, and I remember them telling me, you're not in the crossover, and I was like, man. And then they're like, so you get 2 weeks off, and I was like, what? You know, so it was kind of good.
Yeah.
But it was really nice for me because obviously Dina's was a voiceover, so I didn't get to see her. But Ashley was in Vancouver. She was there filming, and I got to hang out with her, and it was so trippy to see her back in like her Huntress uniform, and like they had like the OG stuff for her, you know, and looking at her and being like, I mean, I know that 20 years has passed, but I feel like I'm 16 again, and we're on Birds of Prey. It was wild. But I was really glad they brought them back. There was a picture of me in one of the crossover episodes, like a literal picture, because they were talking about Beth. And so I always like say that as my claim to fame. I was like, I was in it, just a photo.
Thank you.
Of course.
Hello.
Hey there. We were wondering if you could talk about sometimes you've been recognized in public, and if you've ever had anything just super awkward happen. The more awkward, the better when you've interacted with a fan.
That's a really good question. You know, yes, I feel like, first of all, you always get recognized when you look like shit. Like, I don't know what it is, but it's like crawled out of bed, like haven't washed your hair in 10 days. Yeah, sure, that's the time it's gonna happen. Like when you're feeling yourself and you're like, I'm looking good. Like, no. But I think, so people will often say to me, I know you from somewhere, right? Like they can't place me because a lot of the shows that I've done, I've worn wigs. And it's probably good they don't recognize me as Alice because I was crazy. but they won't immediately know that it's me. So they'll be like, oh, I know you from somewhere. And then, you know, we do this little dance because you don't want to be that person who's like, I'm on TV, you know? And so it goes on for like a little while. And then sometimes they can't figure it out. And then I'm like, should I have said something? Because maybe that would have been cool, you know? One time, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to say something. I'm just going to say it. So this guy's like, I know you from somewhere. Like, where is it? And I was like, I'm on TV. You know, I've done some shows. And he just like kind of stops and then he looks up at me. He's like, no, you went to high school with my sister. And I was like, now I look like that guy, you know? Like, I was like, cool. So now I never say it ever again. But I always have like that's like probably the most awkward. And it was not someone who was a fan of mine. But I feel like I always have like the most lovely interactions. And so I don't actually really have any like bad stories. It's always just lovely people who come up and like completely make my day because I don't feel like I'm famous. Does that make sense? Like I've been really lucky to be on shows and to do a job that I love. But I look at some of these people out there and I'm like, yeah, that guy's famous, you know? So I'm always just really touched when it happens, I guess.
I want to touch on that real quick, and that is doing shows like GalaxyCon. Now, when you're on set, you're filming something, maybe it's a scene, you go home, you film, you go back the next week, you don't know how it, you know, how it's received.
Oh, you don't know the impact
don't know-
of what you're
right.
doing. No, it's not like theater where you're getting constant feedback, or like even right now, if I say a joke and it sucks and you don't laugh, and I'm like, right, you know? But getting to come to conventions and meeting people, and I think I've also been really lucky being in certain shows that weren't just fun shows to watch, like they were really meaningful for people in their own journeys and self-discovery. And getting to have conversations with people about that is so cool, you know? I think that's one of the really beautiful things at cons. Plus, cons are just good vibes, you know? Like, people making community, and, like, I love stories of people who are like, I met my best friend at this convention. I'm like, that's sick. I love that. Hi.
Hello.
Hello, hello. So you mentioned that in Rain you did a lot of research for the role, and then they kind of said, well, we're not doing that. But being that, Elizabeth I is probably one of the most, if not the most studied women in history, historically significant, did you still find ways to kind of bring some of that research into the character and how you played her?
Yes. Sometimes it was tough, though, because I think, a lot of the things that I read were specifically focused around Elizabeth versus Mary, and why Elizabeth had success and Mary didn't. And a lot of the talk about that was how Elizabeth sort of sacrificed a lot of her own experience as a woman, her ability to find love, to indulge in relationships with men who could potentially come to destroy her, whereas Mary used that as something where, she could have a child, she could forward herself. But then, I was just like making out with everyone on that show. So there were like a lot of things that were sort of conflicting for me. I will say there's something magical about putting on that wig, putting on that costume, the corset, that just kind of transforms you, because it's so out of the norm of what we do nowadays. Although it did become what felt quite normal, because I remember once going to Starbucks and I forgot I had my wig and my crown on, and everyone was like, whoa, that girl. I was like, I'll have a latte, please. But yeah, I think in little ways, there was also things that I learned that I hadn't learned, about her special signet ring, or some of the, the powder that she put on her face. And towards the end, like in the last episode, we really pushed to have her be very pale, and of course it was the CW. So you guys might not know this, but the CW used to have this thing called the Triangle of Beauty, and you couldn't put like a cut or a bruise within the Triangle of Beauty, because that part had to look good. So like on Batwoman, when I'd get really messed up, like there'd be bruises like outside of the Triangle of Beauty, but like none in the Triangle of Beauty. So yeah, you're also dealing with that, right? Like you're doing network television, so it has to look a certain way. But I think my favorite portrayal of Elizabeth probably was in that last episode of the series, because we did get to push the boundary a little bit more. I also wanted to have my wig back further and like be bald a little bit, but that one didn't fly.
One thing I didn't get a chance to ask while we were talking about Christmas movies, but do you have a favorite Christmas movie?
Do I have a favorite Christmas movie? It's funny, we actually didn't watch Christmas movies so much at Christmas growing up. We had always watched The Sound of Music.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I don't know. That's what my grandma liked watching. We'd always watch that movie at Christmas. But do I have a favorite Christmas movie? No. One of my favorite movies, though, is Mrs. Doubtfire, and actually Mara Wilson is here this convention, so that's very cool. But do you have a favorite Christmas movie?
It always flips. I love Elf. I think
Elf is so good.
So good.
Yeah.
The bathroom scene gets me every single time. The shower scene gets me every single time. There's somebody who probably hasn't seen Elf as like the shower scene in Elf. What is
Yeah. The sexy elf scene.
So that one, Noelle on Disney Plus is one with
it?
Anna Kendrick. It's
Okay.
amazing.
Wow, you're serious.
I
You've
am.
got a
Oh
list.
gosh, I am. Yes.
Pull out your
Yes.
secret list.
Well, I have a top 10 list. No, like yeah, love Christmas.
You should go to. There's a Christmas con. You should go to that.
Well, hopefully, GalaxyCon will be doing some Christmas
Christmas con.
cons.
There
Yes.
you go.
Yes, we will be doing some in December. So
Oh.
I will. Hopefully, we will be getting some guests from there. Are there any guests? Are there any other celebrities that you haven't worked with at conventions or on shows that you would like to work with or meet, collaborate with?
Well, it's funny that you mentioned Elf because Will Ferrell is like always on the top of my list. You know, actors where he doesn't even have to be doing anything that's funny. I just see his face and I laugh. And sometimes when I'm having a bad day, I'll go on YouTube and look up the outtakes of his movies when he's like joking around on set with other actors. And I just laugh. Like, I mean, I've seen these takes many times and they still make me laugh. He's definitely an actor that I would love to work with. Or my forever girl crush, Marion Cotillard, who I just think is so beautiful and very talented. Didn't love her death scene in the Batman that she did, no shade. But yes, her as well. I mean, anyone, every actor brings something different. I feel like I've been really lucky to work with a wide range of people, but there's so many more that I would love. Oh, that, and I'd also love to be a zombie. I feel like I say this at every convention. Nobody's listening to me. But, like, how many iterations of The Walking Dead have there been? Have I been in any of them? No, I've been saying this for years. But why not? We'll just put it out there again.
Put it out.
Give me a call.
Tweet
If
about
you
it
have a
right now.
zombie
Everybody
movie.
in here, tweet about it. We're live streaming right now on the YouTubes, so somebody can watch.
I know, honestly. I've watched every zombie movie and football movie, oddly enough, even though I'm not into football and I don't even really know the rules, but I do love football movies. But I always, like, if a zombie movie comes out, I'm like, yes. And I get ready and I'm like sitting down and Alex, my husband's always like, you know how it ends. Like, you know what's good. There's no original zombie movie. And I'm like, don't care. Shut your mouth. We're going to watch it.
Have you thought about writing your own zombie movie?
No, because, like, you know, that's like my thing. That's like zombie movies. I can't write my own zombie movie.
That's
It's like,
true.
you know, it's like trying to remake your mom's recipe that you loved. It's never as good. It's only good when your mom cooks it.
Have you thought about branching outside of the acting world to be behind the camera?
Yes, I actually am in the process of doing that. So I know a lot of actors, they like to be directors or writers. I feel like that was not something I was called to. It's not my gift per se. And I also think that some of the reasons why like roadblocks for acting with me would be the hours and the travel, and quite frankly, directors, writers, they come up against those same problems. But I have always been interested in the business side of it and getting to start from like way before I become involved as an actor and develop things and produce them. And so recently, well, not recently, it's been going on for quite some time, which I have learned it's a longer process than what I'm used to. I, with two of my producing friends, we have the rights to Phantoma, which she was, for those of you who don't know, who are not comic nerds, she was the first female superhero predating Wonder Woman. I know you know. And so we are developing a series with a production company, Campagnario, who did Selena for Netflix. They're wonderful. So that's in development. And then also another film, Red Leaves, which is a psychological thriller, also based on a graphic novel. And we're doing that with the producers of The Witch, which I thought was such a great film. So I'm kind of trying to get into that side. I'm not acting in either one of those. But it's just a very different in some ways, but very similar way of being creative within this industry. But I'm just a big believer that people should tell stories, and it's so important. So many cultures, like different times in the world, people have always told stories. So if there's anyone out there who wants to write or direct or do anything, I think go for it.
Do you have any last words for our fine folks here in Oklahoma City who came out to see you this afternoon?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for coming out to see me. I know this is the beginning of the con, and I was a little worried there'd be like two, I think I said this to you outside, I was like, there's gonna be 2 people here. So I'm really grateful that you guys came to see me of all the things that there are to do at this convention. Thank you. Same goes for everyone who's tuning in on the live stream. I don't even know where the camera is. I'm like talking into the void. I really appreciate it. I hope you guys have a really great weekend. And come say hi.
Yep, you'll be going to your table now?
I will be going to my table now.
All right, fantastic. Well, thank you all for joining us here this afternoon for our this is the very first GalaxyCon Oklahoma City
Yay.
Panel.
So it's the first panel of the first.
The first panel of the first convention that we have done here. Congratulations,
serious?
you did it.
Aw. That's really lovely. That's so lovely. Wow. Okay, very cool.
All right, and thank you all for hanging. One more time, please give it up for Rachel Skarsten.
Thank you, guys.
So before we leave, if you guys want to gather up over here by the stage, we're going to take what we call a stage selfie. So if you guys want to gather up, it's a little group photo to commemorate this occasion.